Hello, this is a short reflection for Sunday the 12th of July, the 5th Sunday after Trinity, and the reading is the parable of the sower, Matthew chapter 13 verses 1 to 9 and verses 18 to 23. The parable of the sower is one of Jesus' best known stories and also one of the few where he explains it in detail to his disciples in private. In the explanation it becomes an allegory in which every part corresponds to some aspect of God or human nature. The sower is God or Jesus who sows the seed, which is the good news, the message, the word. And the places where the seed falls represent the different people's responses to that message. We can be so familiar with the parable and with this explanation that we can often overlook how odd the parable actually is. First, it's generally accepted that the explanation comes later than Jesus and probably reflects the early church's experience of trying to share the gospel message. The seed on the path eaten by birds represents indifference, rejection and hostility to the message. The stony ground denotes initial acceptance, but with no real depth. So when trouble and persecution comes, as it often did for the early church and still does for the church today, then there's no depth and the seed withers. Then the thorny ground are the world's cares and concerns stifling the message. Only the good soil results in growth, bearing fruit in people's hearts and lives. But there are problems with taking the neat explanation too literally. Firstly, are we to assume that the seed or the word should be immediately attractive so that the path or soil are at fault? A kind of unalterable moral failing on the part of those receiving the word that can't be changed? Or conversely, is there the danger of fatalism? The path and the stony and thorny ground are as they are. They're not going to change. They're never going to produce a good crop. So can they really be blamed for not doing so? And thirdly, the sower just chucks the seed anywhere, and the parable, at least, in the parable, he makes no effort to ensure it falls in the right places, let alone nurtures it so it grows. The sower's behaviour is very puzzling. Jesus' original hearers would have had a good knowledge of farming, and they'd have seen his behaviour as incompetent and slapdash. Why on earth, literally, was he throwing good seed on bad soil and on the path? No decent farmer in Jesus' day or ours would be so wasteful. The farmer would prepare the soil carefully. And what's the server doing and why? It's quite baffling when you think about it. Theologian Jane Williams' approach helps. This is a story for those who are going to be sowers. God is the main sower, yes, but the disciples are following Jesus in taking his word into all the world. It's their job to ensure that the soil is prepared, the birds scared away, thorns dug up, and the seed doesn't fall where there's insufficient soil. The disciples have this explained to them, not so they can be assured of their place in the elite inner circle, but to underline that they are responsible for those who won't hear the gospel without them. So this isn't a parable about seed, which by its nature will grow or fail depending where it's sown, and it's not about soil, in other words, about the receivers of the message. No, it's for sowers. This puts the responsibility right back on the disciples, and on us for that matter. Yes, the gospel faces hostility, indifference and lacklustre commitment, but it will bear fruit, providing it's nurtured well. God isn't an incompetent farmer, but he is abundantly generous, even wastefully or foolishly so in our eyes. He's willing to risk planting his seed in the most unlikely places. After all, he's planted it in you and me. God's willing to accept some waste because he is a God of hope and of risk. And we respond to him as a matter of choice. We're not forced. As we emerge from lockdown, what might be the thorns and weeds we need to remove? What might be the stony soil that needs clearing and enriching in our lives so the seed may find more places to grow and bear fruit in our lives and in the life of the church? And further, what kind of seed can we sow and how can we nurture it in our local communities, our nation and our world? It's been said, rightly, that we won't return to how things were before. Can we begin to see now how we may plant seeds of gospel hope, that through our careful nurture and our openness to God's Spirit, two things God really cares about, we may bear fruit for God and for ourselves. Amen.